Well, welcome to another edition of CTreySports One-on-One. I am Sam Valenti, joined today by Pac-12 Network host Ashley Adamson. Ashley, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Sam. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, it is an absolute pleasure to be talking with you. It was a crazy season for Pac-12 football, and I would say a very successful one for the Conference of Champions. What are your overall thoughts on how the season went for the conference?
Sam, I'll tell you what, back on June 30th, when the Pac-12's world sort of blew up, if you had told me that I'd be feeling how I'm feeling sitting here today, I don't know that I would have believed you. This was, especially given what happened before the season started, of course, with the news that USC and UCLA are going to the Big Ten. This is one of the most special and my most favorite seasons of Pac-12 football. And I just finished up my 11th season at Pac-12. So I think when you look at the talent top to bottom, you look at the new coaches that came in this year, and not to mention the ones that are coming in for the following year. I know people are really excited in Tempe, as they should be, about Kenny Dillingham. I'm sure we'll talk about him. Deion Sanders in Boulder. Someone just told me yesterday that Colorado football's Instagram account like tripled or quadrupled overnight once the announcement hit. So to say that there's a lot of excitement and energy, and then just the product on the field. Yes, of course, we would have loved to get a team back in the playoff. That playoff drought continues after Utah beat USC in the champ game. However, when you look at how many teams we have ranked in the top 20 of the CFP, and you look at all the different storylines, and, you know, we've got a Heisman finalist and Caleb Williams, and Michael Penix just announced he's coming back to Seattle. So there is a ton of good juice around this conference right now, and it feels awesome.
Yes, I would have to agree, and yeah, I think it was just a very, very successful season, you know, for the Pac-12, and it was really great seeing so many teams have good seasons, end up ranked in the polls at the end. Just I really enjoyed watching, the conference this year, especially as a fan of the conference. So it was really cool to see. I wanted to talk a bit about your background, obviously in sports, because you have quite the background. You were an athlete growing up and stuff. So just how did you get interested, in sports growing up, and specifically, how did you become a Notre Dame fan growing up?
Well, those two questions that you just asked are directly linked, and the answer was my father. Gary Adamson went to Notre Dame, as did a lot of my family. And he was the big reason, A, why I liked Notre Dame growing up, and B, why I fell in love with sports. I think he started taking me to Notre Dame football games when I was a really little girl. And that was sort of my connection with him from the beginning. We grew up and lived in Denver and watched Broncos games. He took me when the Rockies came to Denver. He took me to the, first game at Coors Field, and just all these different things growing up. I sort of just fell in love with sports, and it was kind of a big part of my childhood experience. And my mom was also a huge sports fan in her own right too. So yeah, I think I kind of grew up around it. I always loved playing. Basketball was my first love. I ran track for a year when I went to college in Boston. I was the black sheep of the family who chose Boston College over Notre Dame, which probably could do a whole podcast on that. But I've been really lucky. I think I used to talk with my dad in high school about, wow, wouldn't it be cool to be a sports broadcaster? And Hannah Storm, look at her, and Susie Colbert. And there were so many women who I looked up to. I thought Robin Roberts was incredible. And then the big question is, as everybody knows, like, how do you make that jump, and how do you get into it? So it's been a long journey, but I think from when I was a very little girl, I sort of fell in love with sports, the competition aspect, the energy that you get when you're at a game. And I feel just like the luckiest person on the planet that I've been able to forge that into a career.
That is just awesome. Do you have a favorite memory of watching Notre Dame as a kid?
Good question. Let me think. Do you want to know what's funny is that my real favorite memories when I was little, because once I went to BC, and then obviously now I started covering the Pac-12, like I don't cheer for the Irish like I used to when I was younger. I was loving it when BC started to beat up on Notre Dame. I think we were 3-1 against them when I was at BC. And then of course, every time they play Stanford and USC, I'm really pulling for the Pac-12, with all apologies to my family. But I think growing up, when I think about the games that like I remember and what I remember about the experiences, it wasn't even necessarily the games. I would say that the things that I loved about and think about and have memories about were going, being on South Quad with my dad and getting a steak sandwich before a game. Or watching I was obsessed with the band, like they'd have a pep rally and the band would come in and I would just like the drum circle and all this stuff that would happen right before the game. And those were the memories that I have as a kid. Because to be honest with you, I probably, wasn't paying nearly enough attention to what was actually going on the field, or didn't even really appreciate what was going on. But my favorite memories growing up were around all of the things that surrounded the game, if that makes sense. I'd say the memory that sticks out in my brain right now is I watched the Notre Dame USC game, the famous Bush push. And I remember I was watching with my dad and my brother, who also went to Notre Dame. And that was when it struck me that I was like, man, people are so impacted by what happens with their teams. Fans are so funny because it like ruins your week, your month, your year based on the outcome of a game that you have no control over. And I remember that was one of the first times I was sitting there looking at the two of them like, you guys are losing your minds right now and you're so upset, and it like ruined the rest of the day and the next day after that. So that was like the one that pops in my mind. I don't know if it's like a favorite memory, because I was kind of like, okay, guys, let's settle down here. It was there's a reason that it's going to be a famous play for a long time. But yeah, I guess I don't know if that really answered your question, but there's a lot of different memories that pop up. But with Notre Dame, I don't know. Most of my memories about my favorite Notre Dame memories involve them losing at this point.
Well, it's funny. I can say that I can relate to your family, because a couple weeks ago I was in Tucson as an ASU fan. We unfortunately lost to U of A, and that was tough for sure. It was a bitter pill to swallow. So I can.
Yeah, those rivalry games, they do. They hurt. They feel good when you win them, but boy, they hurt on the back end. There's no doubt about it. But that's what makes it fun, and I love the passion, and that's what makes sports great, right? Like, people didn't care, then none of us would have jobs, probably.
Yes, absolutely. So like you mentioned earlier, you end up going to Boston College, of course, a rival of Notre Dame. Was that a difficult decision to make? And then just what was your experience like at BC?
It was a really hard decision to make, in that I'd gotten into both BC and Notre Dame, and I could not pull the trigger on either one. And I remember sitting with my dad at the dinner table, and he said, whatever decision you make, they're both terrific schools. You're going to love wherever you go. The only bad decision is no decision, because if you don't send one of these letters in, and we need to overnight it at this point, you're not going anywhere. And so you need to make a choice. And every morning I would wake up and say, okay, I think it's going to be BC. I think it's going to be Notre Dame. And ultimately I chose BC, partly because I think I was 18 and wanted my own thing. BC was, no one in my family had gone there. I fell in love with Boston. I fell in love with the campus when I went. I knew that I wanted to get into broadcast journalism, or at least I had an inkling that I did. And I felt like Boston would be a better city to try to do that than South Bend. And probably, if I'm being honest, underneath it all, there was a little bit of, I got into BC on my own, and I felt like, I'm a legacy kid at Notre Dame, and I'd just be going, but like, this was very much my own thing. So that was probably all at the heart of it. And my experience in Boston was unbelievable. Like, I met still my girlfriends that I met there were just, and still are, some of my dearest, closest friends. We all live all over the place, but it was incredible. And then probably the most formative thing that happened when I was at BC is my roommate and one of my best friends, who I met when I was at BC. I am now married to her brother, who also went to BC. So that was the life-changing event of going to BC, and kind of, you think about where you're going to college, and that it's a big decision, but truly it is going to set your life on a path, one very specific route. And it's amazing that as a 17-year-old, you're kind of tasked with trying to figure out the best fit for you. But I got lucky, because it was the exact right fit for what I was looking for.
Well, hey, it definitely sounds like you made the correct decision to go to BC. That's awesome. After your time at BC, you ended up going to Boston University. You got your master's. So just after your whole college experience, what was your first job in the broadcast industry?
Yeah, well, it was the only job that I could get because I got turned down by a lot. It was in Albany, New York, with a Time Warner 24-hour cable news station in upstate New York in Albany. And they hired me, as my official title was an associate producer / assignment editor. So I was on the news side behind the scenes, but they knew what I wanted to do. And basically they threw me some bones and let me do some sidelines from some high school football games that aired on Time Warner Sports. I did some college basketball sidelines, and a couple little fill-in things here and there. But yeah, it was a grind. I mean, I essentially spent that year, and it was a very long year. And again, I make great friends, and I'm grateful for that experience. But I sort of realized early on that they were only ever going to look at me as a, producer type. And that if I wanted to actually go try and be on the air, I needed to leave and go somewhere else, which is how I ended up in Syracuse, New York. So that kind of is what started my path. I was in Albany for a year. I was in Syracuse, New York for 2, and then went to then went to Indianapolis. And that was when the Pac-12 Network launched in 2012. And I had been in Indy for about 2.5 years and was able to come out to San Francisco. So it has been a long journey. I can't believe that I've been at Pac-12 for going on 10.5 years. It's been just a total gift. And I feel really grateful for all of it.
Yes, and during your time in Indianapolis, there was a Super Bowl there. Super Bowl 46, it was the second Giants Patriots Super Bowl, and I believe you got to cover that. So what was that like?
Well, you know what, Sam? That is a great question that you bring up. You would have believed that I got to cover it because that's what I would have believed too. And it was actually one of the reasons why I went to Indy, because I knew they were having the Super Bowl, and it was my news director said, if you come here, like, you're going to be able to have on your resume that you covered a Super Bowl. The story that I will tell you about my Super Bowl experience, and this is very much working in local news. And I think, again, when I look back, every single thing that happens to people in their career and in their life that feels hard and unfair and all of those things at the time, you look back later and you just, you understand why it maybe happened a certain way, or you have a better appreciation for where you are now because of what you've experienced. But the Cliffs Notes version of my covering of the Super Bowl was, you may remember that was also at the time that Peyton Manning, he had just had neck surgery, and Andrew Luck was coming up in the draft. And what was going to happen? Were they really going to release Peyton? Was Peyton not going to be the Colts quarterback? Like, you couldn't believe that was a possibility. And so there was all of this craziness going on around Peyton Manning. And obviously Eli was there. So it was like this wild goose chase. So I basically spent the 2 weeks leading into the Super Bowl working both our morning show and hosting our night sports show, or doing reports for a sports show. But it was all, I don't think I talked a single thing about the game. I don't think I did a single report about the actual Super Bowl. And then the real kicker was we finally get to the game, and I'm like, okay, I get to cover the Super Bowl. Like, doesn't matter that I haven't slept in 2 weeks. It doesn't matter that we've been chasing this thing. And well, I get to the game and I get a call from my news director. And she says, hey, we're going to have you leave at halftime and go to the private airport where all the private jets are flying out, so you can try and get some interviews with some celebrities about what they thought of Indianapolis as a host city. And when I say that, it was as upset as I've ever felt, this was as I was walking into the Super Bowl, she called and told me this. And that was one of those moments that I will never forget. I think the tears started flowing, and I just thought, wait, you're going to have me try and go ask Madonna what she thought about Indianapolis as a host city so that we can get 30 seconds. It was so jarring to me. So you asked that question, and it's I covered a Super Bowl, but I didn't actually cover a Super Bowl. So the ironic thing is, I got to stay for the first half. I left when the halftime show started. And it turns out we didn't even have clearance. This is more of a story than you bargained for. I apologize. We didn't even have clearance to go to the airport to get these interviews. So I leave Lucas Oil Stadium. And obviously when you leave the Super Bowl, you can't get back in. And so I watched the second half of the Super Bowl outside in the cold on this small monitor, and was ready to do live hits for a game that I hadn't seen in case we couldn't get transmission inside Lucas Oil. So needless to say, it was not quite the Super Bowl experience that I thought I was going to have, but it was a good reminder that there are so many things that are going to be out of your control throughout the course of your career. And whatever you think is going to be the thing that's amazing isn't always that amazing. And then things that you're not anticipating are going to show up and they're going to be so special and you're going to remember them forever. So that is my Super Bowl coverage experience. But like I said, I'm grateful for all of it. Grateful for all of it.
Wow, that is a crazy story. Oh my God.
That's local news for you. That is local news.
Yep.
And I don't blame anybody who made any of the decisions, because you're all just trying to do what they think is best for the local viewer. But yeah, it was not covering the Super Bowl. That's for sure.
Yeah, and that just shows what a crazy industry the journalism industry is. It's just
Amen.
crazy. It's always changing. You don't know what's going to happen, and it's something, all right.
And whatever you think, and this is what I will say too, because whenever you think it's going great and nothing could be better, and I finally made it, like the industry and the world reminds you that you didn't, or that you're not, or that there's always going to be a step back. And on the flip side of that, there have been so many moments in my career that were so hard that I was questioning, like, why am I doing this? Why am I moving all these crazy places? There's so much financial stress when you first get into this business. You're not getting to do any of the things that all your friends who are in, banking or even whatever it may be. Everybody else's path feels so much. I'm like, oh, you guys get to go to happy hours and you get to have weekends off. Like, what? You get to go to weddings and birthday parties. But it always was like the path had to be the path, because ultimately, always right around the corner, there was another opportunity that kind of opened a door, and you were like, oh, this is why I'm doing this. And this is why it's so special. And I'm so grateful to my younger self for just keeping my head down and keeping going, because there were plenty of times that I thought about getting out of it along the way. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. Now you've been a part of Pac-12 Network since its launch in 2012. So how did you become a part of the network? How did you get your job there? And from your experience, what was the launch night like?
Well, again, I'm trying to keep my answers short here, which I'm not doing a very good job of, so I apologize ahead of time. But the first part of that question was my agent essentially begged Kristen Bredis, who's hiring talent at the time, to meet with me. I was out in San Francisco visiting my brother. And he said, Ashley's going to be in town. She'd love to meet you. She's trying to get out West. I think she'd be great. And Kristen, and we joke about this now, but like, she was not interested. She had, as you can imagine, probably I think she said she had like 5,000 reels that she got within like a 3-month span. And they didn't even know who they were hiring, how many full-time people they were hiring. She knew she had to fill out a bunch of game crews, but they didn't know, as far as the studio, how many full-time people they were going to be. And I was still kind of a local news girl who had only been, the number 2 or number 3 sports person in local news. So thankfully, she finally agreed to meet with me, and we had a great, we just connected. And that is a reminder of, you just need to get the door open, and then it's about the relationships and connections you make with people. Like, that's, I think, what really ultimately is the thing that catapults you in this industry. And we just connected. And, she's, I think, the world of Kristen, but we had a wonderful talk that day. I actually was about to take a job in Washington, D.C. at a local station there. And right at the 11th hour, Pac-12 came in and just said, hey, we do want to offer you, and we'd love you to come out here. And the rest was history. So I got really lucky in terms of timing. I never had to do a full audition. I always joke and said, if I had to come out and do like the actual audition and go through all of that rigmarole, I probably wouldn't have gotten the job, because there were way more qualified people than me. But Kristen told me, years later, she said, I asked her, I was like, why did you hire me? Because you could have hired so many other people that were way more qualified and way more polished. And she said, well, I liked you. I knew you had a chance to be good and develop into, a polished anchor. But she said, we also needed to hire somebody. I knew we were going to leave you hanging out to dry. Like, I knew that things were just going to be chaotic because it was a startup and things weren't going to work and the highlights weren't going to roll. And you weren't going to have the things that people who have worked at ESPN and Fox are used to having. So she said, I got all these people who were really interested, but very far along in their careers, that, well, they'll come, but they want their own show and they want this. And she was like, I needed somebody who kind of didn't know any better and who was like super gung-ho, excited to be here and ready to hit the ground running, and had that like sort of local news background. So I think that was why I got hired. Launch night was one of the most special nights of my entire life. It feels like a dream. I was nervous, all of those things that you would anticipate, but I'm looking around and I'm hanging out with like Ronnie Lott and Summer Sanders and Rick Neuheisel. And I just, to this day, I still think back on that night and the toast that Rick gave in the green room afterwards to everybody, and everybody was passing around, sharing a bottle of champagne, because guess what? Nobody thought to bring cups. No one knew where the cups were. So we were all just sharing. This was like way pre-COVID, obviously, when that was seemingly acceptable to pass around a bottle of champagne. But I just knew that I was part of really something special, that I was never going to be a part of something like this again. And it has, the network has evolved and changed, and there's been plenty of good and bad things that have happened over the past 10 and a half years. But it has been like, this opportunity to be here has been just the biggest gift. And I feel lucky for all of it. So.
Yep, it's kind of crazy. It all started on that one night in 2012, and the rest is history. And
yeah,
now it's you're still going strong, and you're a big reason why I'm a fan of the network. Not just because I go to a Pac-12 school, but your presenting skills, your energy on camera, it's fantastic, and it really makes for an entertaining broadcast.
I appreciate that, Sam. Flattery will get you everywhere. I'll come on your show. I'll do an interview anytime.
Oh, thank you. And then now, as an ASU student and as an ASU fan, I have to ask this: what are your thoughts on us hiring one Kenny Dillingham as our new head coach in football?
I think it's exciting. I think there's always an element of unknown, right? So he replaces his former boss, Dan Lanning, is now the youngest coach in all of, FBS. He's 32 years old. But I think that you're seeing more of that now than ever before, of, okay, who's going to get the next young, hot head coach first? And for Kenny, I got to meet him in person for the first time when we were out at Oregon for the Washington game, and just was really impressed in the short amount of time that I got to chat with him. He obviously, what he was able to do with Bo Nix in the offense this year speaks for itself. But I think the thing that strikes me the most about Kenny Dillingham was watching his press conference, and I'm sure every ASU fan has seen it or at least seen the clip. But when he talked about being home and the emotion that overwhelmed him when he was talking about what this opportunity meant to him. We live in a world where, football coaches are gruff and like, there's no emotion, and just, you got to be tough and this and that. And there's like this hardcore, but I thought that like vulnerability and realness, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And genuinely, even as someone who doesn't know him well or personally, really, I was really happy for him. So there are going to be mistakes along the way, because any first year head coach makes mistakes. That is just, of course. And I think we saw, people can point to different things with Dan Lanning this year and all sorts of different things. But I think in terms of taking a chance on a guy who wants to be at ASU, because that is a critical piece of this, who wants to be at ASU, who wants to stay for the long haul and build it, and brings that young energy and sort of the new era of what college football is about. I think it's awesome. I'm so excited for ASU and for ASU fans who deserve a great product, and deserve something to get excited about. So I am wildly curious to see how it plays out. I think it'll be important that and I haven't seen the latest exactly about who he has hired. I know there's been a bunch of rumors around some of his assistants. I think it will be critical for him to surround himself with some people who have gone through the fire and who've been there and have a lot of, and hopefully some head coaching experience. I know Bill Baldwin is part of the staff and fits that bill, but I think you have everything that you sort of need at ASU to win. And I'm excited to see what he's able to do with the opportunity in front of him, because it feels like, how could you not be excited about the hire?
Yes, I mean, I'm super excited. I can't wait to see what Dillingham is going to do with this team next year. And I'm also very happy that he retained Sean Aguano on the staff. I'm very thrilled about that.
Could not agree more with that. He is, I thought, in terms of class and character, and someone who just cares so much about these young men in the program. We got to know Sean a little bit in some different, when we were on the road a few times this year, we got to interview with him, and he is terrific. And I think that was like the first thing that he did, which was very smart.
Yes, absolutely. Lastly, I have to ask this: what advice do you have for aspiring sports journalists?
Oh, probably more than you want or need. But I think a couple things. One of the things that I think is really hard when you first start out in this business is that you're constantly trying to prove yourself, because that's what it's all about, right? You're looking for that first opportunity. I remember being so frustrated by people saying, well, I just need to see your reel, or I need to see that you've done it. You need to have a year experience or 2 years experience. And it's like, well, if that's the case for every job, how do you get your foot in the door that very first time? And I would say that it is so important to just always remember that I tell people there is no light at the end of the tunnel in this business, because what they don't tell you is that the tunnel is actually circular. So you're going and it's dark, and you just got to keep going with faith, like blind faith, that you're going to get a break, because what's going to happen is that all of a sudden the train's going to come. It's going to come right around the corner and smack you in the face, and you better be able to hold on with both hands. You never know when the opportunity is going to come, and you can't get discouraged by how dark that tunnel is along the way. So I would say, number one, the most important thing is truly know that this is like it's the long path. There's going to be so many things that happen that feel unfair. There are going to be people who probably not as talented as you. They're going to get more opportunities because they were in the right place at the right time or knew somebody. And you cannot let that get to you, and you can't take it personally, because it's just all part of it. The other thing I would say is it's all about relationships, and the relationships and who you are at this stage are going to be the foundation of how far you can get in this career. And don't be nice to people because it's going to benefit you. Be nice to people because that's the right thing to do. And you try truly to help other people. I think we get so caught up in marketing ourselves and trying to make it about, I want to prove that I'm this and that you forget that the people who are the most successful are the ones who look around and try and pull people up around them. And those are the people that are going to want to be around you and want to help you in your career as well. So that's a huge part of it. And then kind of going along with this, but as the last thing I'll say is, even in a world where everything is about Instagram and your reel and all these highlights, like at the end of the day, the people who I think are really good at this in this job, in this industry, are people who understand that it's not about you. If you are doing your job really well and you're asking really good questions and you've done your homework and you're engaging with people and making them feel comfortable, I shouldn't even remember the question that you asked, but I am going to remember how the person who you connected with answered that question, because they felt comfortable with you, because you made them feel comfortable. So I think that is something we think about. I got to make sure that I nail this open, and then I've got this tease, and that my voice is this, and that I asked that, blah, blah, blah. The reality is the best thing you can do is make the people around you shine. And as a host and as a reporter in particular, it is about thinking about how can I set the people up around me so that they can shine. I had somebody tell me, think about your role as sort of like you're like the hostess at a party, and your job is to welcome everybody in, make sure that everyone has what they need to have as good of a time as possible, and to create sort of that, it's like inverse charisma. I don't know if you ever heard that term, but Adam Grant writes about inverse charisma. You should go look it up. It's about people who make other people more charismatic just by being around them. It's not that they have charisma, but it's that they draw it out of other people. So I think that's something that is so critical. And then I think when we all start out in this business, we're so, focused inward because we're trying to get better and grow and learn. So that's normal. But the reality is, if you can just always remember, it's actually not about you. It is about telling the stories of the people around you and getting people as comfortable as they can so that they can share their stories. And if you can do those things and you can keep your head down and know that you're going to get some breaks here and there, it'll happen for you. It really will. And I can tell you, Sam, from having done this interview with you for the last however many minutes, that the most important thing that you can do is be prepared. And you are that in spades. You didn't ask me any questions that you didn't already know the answer to. You led to them perfectly. So I want to give you a shout out and a kudos to that, because I've done a lot of these interviews And I'm like, you can Google and find out a lot of this information online, but you've gone above and beyond. So I appreciate that. And I'll be cheering for you. That's for sure.
Wow. Well, coming from you, Ashley, that truly means a lot. Thank you so much. And gosh, it was just such an amazing time being able to talk with you. Like I said, I'm a huge fan of your work. So just truly an honor. Thank you so much, Ashley.
It's been an honor to talk to you too. I always love connecting with students. It's the best part of the job is being around young people because you guys make us feel young. So I'll be wishing you the best and let's stay in touch. And I'm going to come to you when I need some, to understand exactly what's going on with Kenny Dillingham and ASU. I'm calling you up. All right.
All right. Sounds good. I will definitely be here for sure.
All right. Thank you, Sam.
All right. Thank you, Ashley. Take care.